In the grey streets of Manchester, 18-year-old Eliza wandered with her sketchbook in hand. She had grown up in an orphanage, never knowing the warmth of a family. Her only solace came from drawing the world around her, capturing emotion on paper. She dreamed of something more, a life filled with meaning and love. Despite her struggles, Eliza remained kind and optimistic. People often overlooked her, a quiet girl with paint-stained fingers and distant eyes. But she carried within her a fire that refused to die. And fate was quietly watching her every move. Miles away, in a sleek glass tower, Sebastian Blake signed contracts with calculated precision. At 38, he was one of the richest men in England, owner of a global tech empire. But his success came with a price: loneliness that echoed in his lavish penthouse. His wife had died in a car crash 10 years ago, and he never loved again. He kept people at arm's length, fearing the pain of another loss. Though the world saw him as cold and unapproachable, he was simply protecting a heart that still mourned. Charity events bored him, but a sense of duty often forced him to attend, and one such event was about to change his life forever. Eliza was chosen by the orphanage director to showcase her art at a charity gala. She couldn't believe she would be presenting her sketches to society's elite. With trembling hands, she packed her best drawings and borrowed a dress that didn't quite fit. She stood quietly in a corner, as wealthy guests sipped champagne and ignored the art. But then Sebastian walked in, scanning the room with practiced detachment. His eyes fell on a sketch of a little girl staring at the stars. He stopped, drawn in by the emotion in the pencil lines. Something in that drawing stirred a forgotten feeling in him. Sebastian approached Eliza, curious about the artist behind such raw emotion. She looked up, startled by the tall, sharply dressed man before her. He asked about the sketch, and she explained its meaning with quiet sincerity. Her voice trembled, but her words were honest and heartfelt. He listened, truly, listened for the first time in years. She reminded him of a time when life was simpler and dreams meant something. After their brief conversation, he donated a large sum to the orphanage in her name. Eliza didn't know why, but her heart raced long after he left. The next day, Eliza received a letter inviting her to visit Blake Industries. She thought it was a mistake, but curiosity pushed her to go. Dressed in second-hand clothes, she entered the grand lobby, dwarfed by its opulence. Sebastian greeted her personally, something that shocked his staff. He offered her an internship in the company's design department. She was stunned, unsure whether to accept. But he saw potential in her, something fresh, something real. Hesitantly, she said yes, unaware that this decision would transform both of their lives. Eliza started her internship with determination, despite the skepticism from other employees. She worked hard, staying late to perfect her sketches and designs. Though she lacked formal training, her imagination and heart set her apart. Sebastian watched her progress from afar, quietly impressed. They rarely spoke at first, only exchanging polite greetings. But she intrigued him in a way no one had in years. She didn't care about his wealth or power. She simply treated him as a man. And that was something he hadn't experienced in a long time. One evening, she stayed late at the office, struggling with a presentation. Sebastian found her alone, frustrated and near tears. He sat beside her and offered gentle guidance, surprising them both. For the first time, they laughed together, a soft moment breaking the ice. She told him about her past, about growing up, without a family. He shared a little about his own loss, the pain that still lingered. Their bond deepened in the quiet hours of that night, and something unspoken began to grow between them. News of their closeness began to circulate through the office gossip chain. Eliza faced cold stares and whispered rumors, but she kept her head down, focusing on her work. Sebastian, on the other hand, began to question his own boundaries. He wasn't ready to feel again, yet he couldn't ignore the light Eliza brought into his world. She reminded him of hope and resilience. His once lonely heart began to stir with unfamiliar warmth, and he started finding reasons to visit the design department more often. One afternoon, Sebastian invited Eliza to lunch under the pretense of discussing her project. They went to a quiet rooftop cafe overlooking the city skyline. Their conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter and subtle glances. He asked about her dreams, and she spoke of wanting to design children's books. He offered to help publish her work through one of his companies. Eliza was overwhelmed by his support, but also cautious. Was this kindness or something more? Her heart didn't know what to believe. At the orphanage, the other children cheered Eliza's success. She returned on weekends to teach art classes and donate supplies. Despite her new life, she never forgot where she came from. Sebastian admired her humility and dedication. He visited once, quietly observing her interact with the children. Something about the way she nurtured them touched him deeply. In that moment, he saw not just a talented intern, but a woman with a heart big enough to change lives, including his own. Eliza's book project blossomed with Sebastian's backing. He introduced her to editors, illustrators, and a mentor in children's publishing. Despite her modesty, she quickly proved her talent and passion. The story she wrote was about a lost girl who finds her place in the stars. Everyone who read it felt something stir within them. Sebastian personally funded the first print run, surprising her with the finished copy. She cried when she held it in her hands, unable to believe it was real, and in that moment, he knew he'd do anything to see her smile again. Rumors about them escalated in the media, calling her a gold digger and him a foolish old man. Eliza was hurt, but she tried not to let it show. Sebastian publicly defended her, saying she was a rising talent, not a scandal. His words only added fuel to the speculation, but behind closed doors, he comforted her gently with quiet strength. They began spending more time together, sharing dinners, walking through galleries, talking about their lives. Something was changing between them, soft and undeniable, and neither of them wanted to stop it. Sebastian took her to his family's countryside estate for a weekend getaway. It was the first time he had returned there since his wife's passing. At first, he was distant, haunted by memories that clung to the walls. But Eliza, with her warm presence, breathed life into the cold rooms. She sketched in the gardens, played piano in the empty music room, and asked thoughtful questions. Her gentle nature helped him face his past, one memory at a time. That weekend, he laughed more than he had in years, and when they returned to the city, his heart was lighter. One rainy night after a gala, Sebastian walked Eliza to her apartment. She looked radiant in her simple blue gown, damp from the storm. He hesitated at her door, reluctant to leave her in the quiet hallway. Eliza invited him in for tea, and the air between them grew thick with anticipation. They talked about fears, hopes, and the ache of loneliness. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, and their eyes met with understanding. That night, they shared their first kiss, slow and tender. It was a moment both terrifying and beautiful. In the weeks that followed, their connection deepened into something more. Sebastian, once guarded and stoic, became open and vulnerable with her. Eliza, who had always felt invisible, now felt seen and cherished. But their growing relationship wasn't without complications. His board of directors questioned his judgment, fearing scandal or distraction. Eliza began to doubt whether she truly belonged in his world. Yet every time she saw him, all doubts melted away. Love had taken root, steady and real. Sebastian arranged for Eliza to attend a prestigious design program in Paris. She was overjoyed but hesitant to leave him. He encouraged her, saying that growth required courage. It was a tearful goodbye at the airport, but filled with promise. In Paris, Eliza flourished, soaking in the culture and honing her craft. They stayed in touch through long calls and letters, their bond growing across the distance. He visited once, surprising her under the Eiffel Tower. And there, surrounded by twinkling lights, he whispered that he missed her more than he ever thought possible. Back in England, Sebastian faced an unexpected crisis in his company. A betrayal from within threatened a hostile takeover. Eliza offered to return and support him, but he urged her to finish her course. She, however, followed her heart and boarded a plane home. When she walked into his office during a critical board meeting, jaws dropped. She presented a pitch for a new creative division that revitalized the company's vision. Her ideas were bold, heartfelt, and backed by impressive market research. The board approved it unanimously, and Sebastian looked at her with awe. They celebrated with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. Sebastian confessed he hadn't felt whole until she came into his life. Eliza, teary-eyed, told him she finally knew what it felt like to be loved. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate ring, not flashy but timeless and meaningful. He asked her to move in with him, not as a formality, but as a sign of his trust. Eliza said yes, her heart full, to the brim. They held each other, letting the world fade away. Living together brought new joys and quiet challenges. Sebastian learned to let someone into his routine and share his space. Eliza brought warmth and creativity to his life, placing handmade touches in every room. They had disagreements, but always found a way back to each other. He taught her about business. She reminded him about dreams. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real and growing. And for the first time in years, they both felt like they had a home. Eliza's book became a national bestseller, inspiring children across the country. She donated a portion of the profits to build an art center for orphans. Sebastian helped fund it, naming it the Star House, after her first sketch. On opening day, children from all backgrounds came to paint, read, and explore. Eliza stood beside Sebastian, watching the laughter echo through the halls. They held hands, hearts full of gratitude. In each other, they had found healing. And they knew the final chapter of their love story was just beginning. Months passed, and life settled into a gentle rhythm for Eliza and Sebastian. They worked side by side, balancing business with creativity and love. Every weekend, they returned to the countryside estate, now filled with laughter again. Eliza painted a mural in the garden room, stars, children, and hope woven into every brushstroke. Sebastian often watched her with quiet admiration, still amazed she chose him. Despite their success, they remained humble and grounded. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with rescued pets, visiting children and friends. They had created something neither had known before: a family. One morning, Eliza fainted in the middle of organizing a workshop at the Star House. Concerned, Sebastian rushed her to the doctor. After a few tests, they received surprising news. Eliza was pregnant. She burst into tears, overwhelmed with emotion, while Sebastian held her tightly. He was stunned but overjoyed, a glimmer of fear mixing with love. The idea of fatherhood scared him, but with Eliza, everything felt possible. They celebrated quietly, lying under a blanket of stars in their garden. The future stretched before them, full of promise. As her belly grew, Eliza's heart swelled with both joy and anxiety. Having never known her own parents, she feared she wouldn't know how to be a mother. Sebastian noticed her restlessness and planned a surprise. He arranged a reunion with several women from the orphanage who had once helped raise Eliza. They shared stories, wisdom, and reassurances that warmed her spirit. Eliza realized she didn't have to know everything. She just had to love deeply. And that, she already did, with all her heart. Together, she and Sebastian began preparing a nursery, filled with stars. The birth wasn't easy, and complications during labor left everyone tense. Sebastian refused to leave her side, gripping her hand with a fear he hadn't felt in years. After long, harrowing hours, their baby girl was born, tiny but healthy. They named her Lyra, after the constellation Eliza had loved as a child. Holding her daughter for the first time, Eliza wept with a mix of awe and relief. Sebastian kissed both their foreheads, promising to protect them with everything he had. That night, under the hospital's dim light, the three of them became a family. And a new chapter of their lives began. News of Lyra's birth made headlines, but Eliza and Sebastian shielded her from public scrutiny. They retreated to the countryside for a few months, cherishing their time as new parents. Sebastian discovered a softer side of himself, changing: diapers, singing lullabies and reading bedtime stories. Eliza's eyes often welled up watching him with their daughter, a quiet joy blooming inside her. She wrote and illustrated a new book during those quiet months, inspired by Lyra. Their home was filled with baby laughter, sleepless nights, and overflowing love, and they wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. As Lyra grew, Eliza returned part-time to her creative work. She began hosting art therapy sessions for adopted children and young mothers. Sebastian, inspired by her passion, launched a foundation in Eliza's name. It focused on education, mental health, and opportunities for orphans and disadvantaged youth. Together, they visited schools and shelters, encouraging children to believe in their dreams. Eliza often told them, "You don't need to come from somewhere great to become someone great." Her words lit sparks in young hearts across the country. And her story became one of hope shared in classrooms and homes alike. Despite all the good they were doing, one former executive, bitter and vengeful, tried to tarnish Sebastian's reputation. He leaked false stories about Eliza, questioning her past and accusing her of manipulation. The media frenzy was brutal, digging into her childhood and twisting her words. Eliza was devastated but stood firm, refusing to let shame define her. Sebastian publicly denounced the lies and sued the man for defamation. In court, Eliza testified with grace and strength, sharing her truth. The judge ruled in their favor, and the victory felt personal and profound. After the trial, Sebastian proposed to Eliza again, this time not just with a ring, but with a promise. He knelt in their garden under the stars, asking her to become his wife in front of friends and family. Eliza said yes, tears streaming down her face, holding Lyra in her arms. The wedding was intimate, surrounded by the children from the star, house, friends from the orphanage, and employees who had become family. Eliza wore a dress she designed herself, with hand-stitched constellations along the hem. When they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in sight. It was not just a union, it was a triumph of love. Married life brought them even closer, their love deepened by everything they had overcome. Eliza published another book series, this time with Lyra as the main character. Sebastian stepped back from daily operations, focusing on mentorship and philanthropy. They traveled as a family, showing Lyra the world and teaching her empathy and imagination. Their love story became known not just for its romance, but for its impact. Children from across the country sent letters to Eliza, calling her their hero, and she replied to everyone. Years later, as Lyra ran through the garden chasing fireflies, Eliza and Sebastian sat on a bench under the stars. They were older now, lines on their faces and silver in their hair, but their hands still found each other easily, fingers intertwined. They looked back on their journey with awe, the orphan girl who dreamed, and the tycoon who had forgotten. How? They had healed each other, grown together, and created something lasting. Love had come quietly, but stayed boldly. And as they watched their daughter laugh in the moonlight, they knew this was the legacy that mattered most.